everyone's time. All of my panelists are here, so we're going to go ahead and move forward. So I am Tiffany B. Thomas. I am your council member. I represent District F. We are in District F, the West Side.
The West Side.
That's our call and response. It's the West Side, the West Side. And so this is our second annual public safety town hall. Last year, we were able to join together when our chief was newly appointed as our chief, and there was a lot of robust conversation about some of the issues related to the increase in crime at apartments, just concerns around what's happening in our neighborhoods. Catalytic converters were on the rise, the theft of those. So I'm happy to report we'll be able to revisit that, provide some solutions and what we've been able to do on your behalf. But we're going to also have a robust conversation, because what we learned last year and what we've been learning throughout is that it's not just local city government and the responsibility of the police department for public safety, right? Public safety is all of our responsibility, and the only way we're going to have a safe community is if we have an informed community. So I want to thank you for taking the time to come out tonight. So before we get started, I would like to acknowledge our partners that are always with us lockstep. The International, the West Chase, and the Southwest Management District. If you can raise your hand and beep beep, they are partners with us around public safety. We are actively engaged with them on their public safety committee and working with them as we protect our businesses, and we also protect the residents in the community. I want to acknowledge HPD Midwest and the West Side Command Center. All right, West Side. All right. Energy. I want to appreciate them. A tireless number of emails go out to particularly the DRT divisions of both commands. Our requests around statistics, our requests around, citations, parking, all types of things. They work with us hand in hand. I really appreciate their efforts. Also with the work they've been able to do with clubs. I also want to point to our resource tables we have tonight. Crime Stoppers, Texas Family Protective Services. We have resources from the Office of Emergency Management, our Harris County Sheriff's Office, and we have voter registration in the back. Where's Maryland? All right, Maryland. District F resident, registering voters. And so that's also very important. So before we get into our panel conversation, I just want to highlight some of the investments I've made locally as your district member in response to public safety. When I ran in 2019, I was very clear that public safety was one of our focuses. And so most recently, I released a series of those initiatives, one with our street light program. And so we were featured on the news around that. One of the things that I do know is that we have to create a community of safety, and oftentimes simple things such as street lights and making sure our intersections and our public spaces have the lights that they need so people can feel safe walking from the park, catching the bus, walking home, taking a stroll, walking their dog. So we're making that investment. That's a $15,000 investment that's ongoing. We're still receiving recommendations. In addition to that, it's my personal belief that public safety is not just about centering policing, but it's about centering the investments of community that supports the work of the police. So we can't lean on police when we're not investing in our communities for sidewalks, for cushions, crosswalks, safety, cameras, all of those types of things. And so far to date, I have invested $384,000 in those local district infrastructure improvements, something that we're seeing all throughout the district. So that's something that y'all need to know and we can be proud of. In addition to that, the flock cameras, that was in the news recently, and we've been talking a lot about that at council, and I believe our representative from HPD will talk about that. $110,000 investment in flock cameras soon to come to the district. And our fire chief is not here. He will be joining us today because public safety is not just about police, but also our fire department. And to date, I have invested $195,000 of upgrades for faster service for all of our stations in District F. So I'm really proud about that. So your tax dollars are actively at work. Okay? So a couple weeks ago at public session, we were at the end of the public session, and there was a speaker who came, and she had such a compelling case because she was a family member of a victim of crime. And I think all of us remember in February when we heard on the news a young girl was on her way to eat pizza with her family and was shot and lost her life because of another crime happening at an adjacent property. And so Miss April Aguilar is here, and I wanted to offer her an opportunity to share a few remarks about what her cause is. She's currently the founder of Parents for Public Safety. And I was just such in awe, my heart was broken because I could not imagine simply she's listening to music and on her way to eat pizza and lost her life. And so Miss April has definitely been on a crusade around public safety, and I do believe that what she has to offer is an opportunity for you to be more informed, but also there's a call to action. So if you will, let me get a mic for you, and then you can come to this podium.
Thank you.
Unless you're loud like me.
I'm loud.
Okay.
I'm loud. It's okay.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. First and foremost, my name is April Aguirre. I am the aunt to Arlene Alvarez. As she said, my niece was simply within arm's reach of her mom and dad in the backseat of her truck, headed to go eat pizza. Her mom and dad could have gone to eat dinner alone, but they choose to include their children in everything they do, even a romantic Valentine's dinner at Spanky's Pizza. That night changed our life forever. Like most people, I didn't really take much of an interest on how our community worked. But then she was taken from us. And we had to take this crash course on what is the process. In the midst of trying to figure out why Arlene was killed, what did she do to deserve a bullet on the right side of her temple while simply sitting in the back seat of our truck? We had to deal with the fact that her murderer was out 22 hours after he shot her. At that point, we couldn't understand why the murder of a 9-year-old little girl was out. This took us down this road. We realized that bail bond companies are a lucrative business. Somebody made money off of my niece's death. And people, as of right now, are still getting rich off of crime. Innocent dead children and dead people. And I don't know how we can live in this society and allow people to make money off of this. Bail bond companies don't care if they get their money now or over a period of 2 years, like a car payment, as long as they get their money. That was just something that we couldn't swallow. So instead of staying at home crying, we decided to show up to these events and figure out who will listen to us. We didn't know who could make the change. So we started showing up to bail bond boards. And we asked who and why. After much push, these people were forced to make a change. Now, people accused of violent crimes have to pay a 10% minimum mandate. That was passed only 2 months after Arlene was killed. This is the worst of our society. Murderers, people accused of sexual crimes, aggravated assaults, the worst of the worst. Now these people have to pay 10%. So put things into perspective. Out of a $100,000 bond, a person could pay a little as no money, or $1,000 or $2,000. Now they'd have to pay the full 10%, which is $10,000. That doesn't sound like a lot, but Arlene's life was worth at least $10,000. He should have struggled. Murderers and people committing these heinous acts should have to be financially inconvenienced to get out of jail. We shouldn't be making it any easier. When you hear about these people on bond, it's because we have a system that makes it simple for them to get out of jail. And I'm not worried about the people that walk into Walmart and steal some stuff. You know, we're talking about heinous crimes, things that our society shouldn't accept. In all of this, I realize that there's people that are much smarter, more educated, and far more experienced that should be doing this, but they're not. I realize that it takes just a normal person like us. I am a nurse by trade. For me as a nurse to have to go and try to fix this system. But here we are, and we're not going to stop showing up because my niece can't speak for herself today. She can't. And I can guarantee you and tell you right now that if somebody were to ask her in heaven if she wanted to die, she would tell you no. But crime has no criteria. There's no criteria for killing. They're killing the rich, the poor, the young, the old, and every single race. We have to come as a community together issue. Our next thing that we now have before the bail bond board in July is to make these transactions public information. Victims of crime deserve to know how much these people are getting out of jail. The only people that wouldn't agree with us on that is the bail bond companies that are not following this 10% minimum mandate. If you're an angel like you say you are, then you have no reason disclosing your transactions. But they have something to hide. They're getting rich off of our misfortunes, and it's very sad. However, because we are dealing with this firsthand, we're dealing with this one step at a time. And right now, we're going to fix the bail bond problem. We're going to make sure defendants pay what they have to pay, what is entitled by law to pay. And we're going to ensure that the bail bond companies are following all the rules. There's no reason that we should be making it any easier for defendants of heinous crimes to get out of jail. After we accomplish that, hopefully this July, we're going to move on to make sure that our funding, we have enough funding to our DA to handle this backlog, because we have 130,000 cases. Not cases, but 130,000 families waiting for justice. And we are just one of those families in the back of the line, because my niece was killed in February. And since then, more and more children, and I specifically speak of the children because I hope that that will touch people. But there's been a lot of innocent adults as well that didn't want to die. And we have to come together to make sure this doesn't become Gotham City, right? Harris County, I've lived here, I was raised here my whole life. We deserve to live in a safe society, because this used to be a safe place to live. We knew that if you did something funky, you were going to go to jail. And we did not want that. Now criminals know that they can go around that because they're going to be out tomorrow. When they told me at Commissioner's Court that if I didn't be quiet, I was going to go to jail, I told them, it's okay, I'll be out by dinner. And I meant that, because this is the way we treat our criminals. If murderers are out within 22 hours, I'm going to get out of jail for being outspoken within a couple. But I thank everybody for showing up, because it takes us coming together like this to learn about what's going on in our society. And I thank you, and we're going to continue to work hard, because just because our lives were shattered and we no longer have the opportunity to have a happy ever after, you guys still have the ability to keep your families whole. And I hope that we can save, even if it's just one person. I hope that this can impact everybody. Thank you.
Her information will be, it's at our district table. So if you are interested in following her work, learning more about the Bail Bonds Commission, please follow her. Public safety is all of our responsibility, and this is just one component. So pivoting briefly, we do have some public officials in the room, and I want to acknowledge them. My colleague, Councilmember Sally Alcorn, at large 5. Thank you for coming to the West Side. We also have our Harris County Precinct 4 Commissioner Jack Cagle. We are in with the hat. As you recall, redistricting happened. We were Precinct 3. We are now Precinct 4. There are a tremendous amount of resources that the county can support your neighborhood with in partnership with the city. And so thank you for your attendance. We also have a representative from Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher's office. Ms. Stephanie, hello. Thank you so much. Also, redistricting, we have historically been the Texas House District 9. We are Texas House District 7. So please make contact with Stephanie if you have federal issues that need to be resolved. And I know you do, because y'all email me about the Postal Service and your late mail. So Stephanie can definitely assist. And I want to say those are all the elected officials and representatives I see tonight. So I want to move on with tonight's discussion. So I want to go ahead and introduce our panelists tonight. Of course, if you've been following social media, unfortunately, our police chief, Troy Finner, has tested positive for COVID. And so will not be with us, but all is well. All is well. He is in complete support of our work and has sent one of his very, very best, Chief Satterwhite, to join us. Chief, come on. Sit. That Chief Finner has assembled is unmatched, so he will definitely be able to address many of your concerns and then talk about many of their investments. So I want to briefly read his bio. Chief Larry Satterwhite is a community-oriented law enforcement executive with the Houston Police Department with 32 years of law enforcement in the 4th largest city in the United States and the most diverse urban city in the world. He is the Executive Assistant Chief of Patrol Operations and is responsible for protecting Houston and our surrounding region. Chief Satterwhite is leading, hold on, make sure I have the right bio. Oh, he joined HPD as a cadet January 22, 1990. I'm not going to tell you what I was doing in 1990. Playing at somebody's park, I'm sure. During his tenure, he has served patrol, investigations, SWAT, criminal intelligence, special operations, and homeland security. Give him a round of applause. Secondly, she's no stranger. She joined us for our first discussion last year, Attorney Crystal Okafor. She is in the Office of Policing Reform and Accountability. She was appointed by Mayor Turner in 2020, was it 2020? 2021, as the Deputy Inspector General for the City of Houston's newly created Office of Policing Reform and Accountability. She's the first person to hold this position, and she investigates complaints. She works closely with the Independent Police Oversight Board, and I'm happy to report that District F has 2 representatives from our community sitting on that board through appointment, and she works with them to restore trust among Houston's diverse community. With this newly created position, she leads the mayor's task force on policing reform that went into effect May 2022. She's hit the ground running, and she's also managing the mayor's One Safe Houston initiative. She'll be speaking about that later tonight. This initiative is a comprehensive violence reduction strategy that links research-based strategies to improve public safety and reduce the harms caused by violent crime. Go ahead and give her a round of applause. And last year, and oftentimes we receive queries in our email, social media comments, asking about what's happening with the judicial system. And that's out of my scope. So I knew once we hosted this again that we will have a sitting judge, a criminal judge, to respond to some of your questions. Because again, public safety is what? All of our responsibility. So I am so proud and I appreciate her joining us tonight, Harris County Criminal Court Judge Shannon Baldwin. She's practiced law for over 22 years before being a judge. She's licensed in Georgia and Texas. She practiced in Atlanta, Georgia for 4 years before returning to the great state of Texas. She's a former prosecutor and opened her law practice in Texas in 2003. She's formerly a partner at Baldwin Williams and Associates, and she has tried cases from traffic court all the way up to capital murder. Currently, she's the elected presiding judge of the Harris County Criminal Court at Law Number 4. In addition to her regular docket, she also presides over 1 of 5 misdemeanor sober courts, assisting individuals with alcohol and drug addiction. In her first 2 years on the bench, Judge Baldwin was the local administrative judge for all 20 misdemeanor courts in Harris County. Go ahead and give her a round of applause. She's going to bring a lot of context to the conversation when we get to our judicial system. So I want to go ahead and get started. Let me get my notes together, make sure that I'm in order. So let's talk about, Crystal, I want to start with you. Let's talk about the mayor's One Safe Houston plan. I know there's been a lot of publicity around that, and feel free to share the mic. A lot of publicity has been around that. Council members had an opportunity to contribute to that plan, but this was in response to the spikes we were seeing last year. And since this comes out of your office, lay the case out for why the plan, what's happening with the plan, and what people can expect to, it might work if we turn on the machine.
Thank you so much. The mayor announced the plan, One Safe Houston, in February of this year when we saw the spike in crime and everyone was talking about how Houston was the murder capital of the world and all of these things, right? And so we thought, what can we do to bring down the violent crime and the crime in the city? And what we thought about is that not only do we need to do a plan that involves the police department, but this crime rate and what we're doing, we have to bring in the entire community. And so there's several aspects of the plan The plan involves an implementation of issues within the youth. It involves the community. It involves the police department. It involves mental health aspects. And there has been $53 million used of ARPA funding for the plan. Initially, when the mayor announced the plan, it was $44 million, but we've seen so much success in the past 4 months with reducing violent crime in the city of Houston that he's allocated almost another $10 million to the plan. And so some of the key things about the plan is there are, Chief Satterwhite here, he oversees the 125 additional overtime officers that we're seeing in patrolling every day. Since January of this year, or not January, since February of this year when they started, they have done over 700 felony arrests, and this is just the 125 officers. They've recovered 300 automobiles that were stolen, and they have recovered over 500 guns. There's also mental health aspects of it. $22 million have been allocated towards mental health so that we can use that funding. So there is the MCOT teams. The MCOT teams are 18 teams of mental health professionals that go out to scenes instead of the Houston Police Department or Fire Department going to those scenes. And they have responded to over 1,000 calls in which the police department and HFD have not had to go. And so that's 1,000 times that they have been able to stop so that the police can go to some of the more important scenes, the critical things. We also have 20 CERT teams now, and those are police officers and mental health clinicians, and they have responded to 600 calls when someone is in need of a mental health crisis, and of those 600 calls, there's only been 1 arrest. So they're going out there and doing the work that needs to get done to help bring that mental health aspect to the agencies that need them. Additionally, there's a core aspect that's in place where if an officer is at a scene and they realize that someone has a mental health issue, they can get on an iPod-like device and they can reach out to a health professional via telehealth, and they can help them, assist them with the things that they might need in that scene. There's also an additional $9 million of domestic violence. In that aspect, since 2021, we saw an increase of over 50% in domestic violence homicides. And so now we have DART going around the clock. DART has gone out to over 1,000 scenes in the first quarter of the year, and they have assisted over 500 individuals with receiving shelter. And that shelter is so important, as Judge Baldwin can also discuss. That first 72 hours after someone has either been had a domestic violence type of situation, the most pivotal time for them. Within that first 72 hours is when you'll typically see that homicide or that escalation of violence. And so the fact that we're able to get that shelter in place is critical. And they've also are now doing forensic exams, and we've done over 25 of those in the first quarter. Also, as was mentioned about the Catalytic converters, there was an ordinance passed by all of the council members in reference to that, and so it's making it illegal for you to go and sell a Catalytic converter without showing proof of ownership. We're also pushing for legislation to be passed so that it's easier for Chief Satterwhite and all of the HPD officers to prosecute those cases, and they are looking at implementing something similar to what we have here in Houston.
That's really good, and lots of content information. But Chief Satterwhite, even though we love Chief Finner, you're actually probably the best person because you're managing the patrol operations. And one of the #1 emails that I and my team receive, the request to have more patrol presence in their neighborhood. So can you talk about the 125 additional officers or the overtime that's dedicated to them and the impact that that's making?
Absolutely, but and I'm a really loud talker here, so I may be blowing y'all up. But first, let me say thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here and be a part of this. And there's so many familiar faces in the room and some new faces. So for those that that know me, have a good evening. And then of course those that don't, thank you for having me. So in the 125 officers that we are putting out into the field, our focus is on violent crime. I mean, within the city, we have faced some real challenges along with the nation, and I think all of you are well aware of that in terms of violent crime and in our homicide rates in the cities, in the major cities in the nation. So that's really our focus. So when we are deploying those additional officers, we're using a data-driven approach. We are looking at where the violent crime is happening, and that is primarily where we are trying to deploy those additional officers to. And so you might know some of them in this areas where you typically see more violent crime or more crime in general, and that happens across the city. So 125 officers sounds like a lot of officers, but the truth is that we are very short still on staffing in Houston. Just to kind of give you a stat that kind of drives home the point, we in the city of Houston and the city of Chicago are approximately the same size in terms of population. They're about 250 square miles. We're about 670 square miles. And Chicago has 13,000 police officers to cover the city of Chicago. Houston has just over 5,000, about 5,100. So as you can imagine, we are very short. And thank you, Councilmember. Thank you, Councilmember Alcorn. Thanks to Mayor Turner and everyone for giving us the additional funds to get additional officers, because we are desperate to have more officers. Well, with those officers, we have to be good stewards of the monies that y'all are funding us, and so the best place to place those officers are in those high crime areas, and we are having some success. As Crystal just talked about, she's very kind. We work together all the time on this initiative, and I couldn't do it without her, and I'm very thankful for that. But so we are trending in the right direction. We are seeing our violent crime in Houston and crime overall go down, with the exception of property crimes, specifically from vehicles, and we'll touch on that later. But things are going in the right direction, but it is an ongoing challenge, and we're going to need your help. And so when you want additional officers in your neighborhood, and I know you do, because everybody does, it is a challenge, because I know that you also want overall violent crime to go down, and you want our most vulnerable populations to be protected. And sometimes that can be in other areas. So please be patient with us. When you call, we are going to come. I know that sometimes there's a little bit of a delay, and because we have to prioritize the kinds of calls, the most high priority where people are being harmed are always going to get the first response. And the less serious calls, still serious and still very important to you, and we get that. We are coming, we will respond. It's not always the exact time you want us there, but we will come. But I guess I'm asking for patience, because it's not always easy. We just only have so many to put out there.
And I'm glad that you raised that. So from my friends in the room, we get your emails. So when y'all are asking for 4th of July is getting ready to come, and I want to acknowledge our fire chief that just walked in, Chief Pena. He'll be able to address some of the work from 4th of July, and when we get that. So when you call the office and you're saying someone's suspicious, I think I may want the cops to come, understand what you're working against. Understand that there may possibly be a delay in terms of the resources. And I want to also, Crystal had mentioned the catalytic converters, and I want to give a shout out to West Side and Midwest. They posted in partnership with Southwest Management, International Management District, catalytic converter etching events. There's actually one coming up on June 30th. At the Walmart on Beltway 8, and they have a sign-up sheet. So if you have not had your catalytic converter etched, it's an opportunity to do that at no cost to you. And so DeAndre in the back, wave your hand. He'll take your name. He'll sign you up. So if you have not done that, please do that. That's a free resource to you. So Chief Satterwright is right on point. They're really focusing on violent crime. And I want to give a shout out to Kavana Cloud and her team and all the work that they're doing around the domestic violence. It's phenomenal what they're able to do to intervene for those women and those children in those very violent homes. So Judge, I want to pivot to you. Oftentimes we'll get something will happen in the news. I'll get an email in the office. It's totally out of my scope, but they'll say, what are you going to do about those criminals? And I'm like, I can't personally do anything. But can you educate us, just for those of us in the room, that may not be familiar with how the judicial system works with public safety and with the city and how we work together with HPD?
That's a big question, bigger than you know. But let me say this: certainly, all of the And I'm sorry, let me back up for a second. I wanted to make one correction, and you don't know this now, but I'm no longer one of the judges for the sober court. I'm a veteran, so now I run the misdemeanor veterans court, which services the same type of individuals, only we're veterans. However, they suffer from either some sort of mental health disorder, drug and alcohol disorder, and so we're able to help them in the same way. It is a treatment court. That's just another volunteer docket that I've taken on amongst some of the other committees that I volunteer in addition to my normal docket. Okay, sorry, I just wanted to.
Thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you. All right, so it takes, this is what we all have to figure out here, is that it takes all of us to come together. It takes all of us to stay in that lane and do what it is that the law requires us to do in order for all of this to work, right? So the police are our first line of defense. They're out there risking their lives, and they may arrest somebody. That then gets filtered into the court system. Initially, the report comes from the police officers. They give that to the district attorney's office. They have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week intake process. That information is filtered to a magistrate, and then they start talking about bonds. I'm almost afraid to throw that word out there, but that's the first place it comes. You're okay. That's the first place it comes, and the first time a discussion is made at the magistrate level about bonds. And if you want, I can go into this question that they asked me here. Okay. Essentially, the biggest issue probably now in the news is, why are repeat offenders still getting out? How does that happen? And what do we do moving forward? So I want to distinguish first between misdemeanors and felony courts. I am a misdemeanor court judge, so the maximum type of offenses in my court are Class A misdemeanors. That means they're punishable up to a $4,000 fine, up to a year in jail. The Sheriff's County Sheriff's Department sets good time or good credit time. So what that means, if this person is convicted for 1 year of jail time, they're going to get, for every 1 day, they'll get credit for 3 days. That means they're going to maximally spend 4 months in jail. In my court, that's what happens. If it is felonies, that's state jail felony. We're talking about prison at this point. State jail felony, first degree, third degree, second degree felonies, okay?
Can you give examples of a misdemeanor crime?
So a misdemeanor crime, what you hear most commonly, or what we hear most commonly, are DWI, so driving while intoxicated, and then probably the second to that would be assault family member cases. Those are our two main offenses that we see on a regular basis. It could run the gamut. I mean, everything that's not worthy of going to prison is going to come through a misdemeanor court. So your thefts and all of that, okay? Those are, and felonies, obviously murders, aggravated assaults, aggravated robberies, those things that we hear more so in the news, those are all felony cases. All right, so now, let's just say, how do we keep the repeat offenders, or how is it that the repeat offenders get out again? So there are a series of things that need to happen in order for a judge to deny a bond to anyone, okay? First and foremost, within the felony land, if you are you commit capital murder, that can be a denial, reason for denying the bond. If you are a true habitual, that can be a reason for denial of the bond. Or if you in fact violate some sort of bond condition. What's true in misdemeanor court as well is if you violate a bond condition, then, and that's been proven, then we can actually deny a bond at that point too. How does that happen? The district attorney's office will file a motion. They file that motion asking for the denial of that bond. That then has to be set for a hearing. The only way a judge knows that that motion has been filed is if the district attorney office approaches us and says, Judge, we filed this motion for no bond or for a higher bond. Please set this for a hearing. We have no idea that these motions are filed until somebody notifies us of that. Unless we're specifically going in to look for something. But if you can imagine, we have thousands of cases, and so that doesn't happen unless somebody brings it to our attention. We set the hearing. When they come to the hearing, they have a burden. They have to prove that the offense or the defendant is substantially guilty of the criminal offense in order to hold that person on a zero bond. So you've got to have the motion and the hearing, and they have to meet that burden. And it's not an easy burden, but everyone's skilled at what they do, and so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If it is not met, then that person ultimately could get a bond. And they may very well be a repeat offender, but if those things don't happen, then they could very well get that bond. That's what the law requires us to do. There are other circumstances under which a person who might ordinarily have a substantially high bond in, say, felony court, and if that case is not indicted within a certain period of time, then a good defense attorney will bring that up to a judge's attention, because the judge doesn't do it on their own, but a defense attorney might bring that up and say, hey, this has not been indicted, my client is in on a $500,000 bond, and we want to make sure that bond is reduced to a more affordable bond. At which point in time a hearing is held, and if the state does not present evidence further or explain substantially so why this case hadn't been indicted timely, the judge will be forced to reduce that bond. And it's at that time they really have to look at what is affordable for that defendant. Now, throughout all of this process, every judge is going to consider the safety of the community, right? Because we're citizens too, and as much as, you know, the robes are they're not cute. I was gonna say cute, they're not cute, they're actually hot. Not cute at all. But as much as we have those, they're not bulletproof. They don't give us any greater protection than anything else. We have to follow our law. That is what our oath requires us to do, and so we do that, and we take that very seriously, even if we disagree with some of the decisions we have to make, and that happens more often than not. You've got to do that. Let's see, so I think I've covered that. And if the basics in misdemeanor court, again, if there is a violation of a protective order, I can deny the bond. If there is some violation of a bond condition, meaning that person is already out on a bond, but they violated in some form or fashion, I have to have a hearing. They're entitled to a hearing, but post that, and if the burden is met, then I can deny that bond. But those are the circumstances that we can deny bond.
And that's a lot of information, and I think we, as a community, we have to understand our role in that and what we can do in understanding the role of the judge, and not when we get to the voting booth saying, oh, there's quite a few judicial candidates, I don't know who's anything, or I don't know the difference between courts, because the way she just explained it about her misdemeanor court and the levels, I think that's important, and for us to digest this type of information. So when we get the article that says this judge again let this criminal out, we have a little bit more context about what is within what the law allows them to do. And so I want to come back with some additional questions. And if I can pivot, you know, most recently, and probably the last few years, we've been dealing with mass shootings, right? And it was Santa Fe, it was Buffalo, it was Uvalde. And I know I'm personally concerned about, you know, I had to think about how was I going to have a conversation with my dad about not going into the grocery store, and for him to start using a technology to order his food, because you just don't know in these public settings. And even this past weekend, friends were resistant to going out to celebrate Juneteenth because it was public and it was crowds, and they just had resistance about that. So Chief Satterwhite, you know, can you talk to us about, one, of course, guns and how y'all are responding to that, but then also how the police department is prepared to respond to a potential mass shooting, and what we can do as residents?
So I could take up the rest of the night with just that question. All right, so it's always a travesty that anybody in our city is afraid to go out and enjoy what the city has to offer. Because I've always been proud of the city and proud of everybody in the residents. We have great communities all over. But we understand the concerns that are raised, and of course, so we as your police department and all the other law enforcement agencies and public safety. I got Chief Pena over here. He's well with me, and he may even have some comments on this subject. But we are constantly training and preparing, and hoping and praying that we never actually face what we have seen of lately. I was at Santa Fe. I responded to Santa Fe, and it was very tragic. And what's going on around our nation is horrible. But I can tell you that our law enforcement agency, the Houston Police Department, as well as our sister agencies, are working very hard to prepare that, so that if something were to happen, if we were to encounter a threat or something like that, that we have the most importantly, the training and the mindset that to manage that issue and to respond effectively and quickly and resolve that to mitigate any kind of harm or loss of life to anyone. That includes training with the fire department, because we have large responses where we may be responding into a building or an objective where people might already be hurt, and we still have to go and find the shooter and find him quickly or her quickly and stop that harm. But at the same time, we have people that need medical care immediately, and that's why we now take in fire with us, and we work together and set up all these things. And so that you can know that we do in Houston heavily. We train that way, and we even have additional training where we impromptu will call our officers when there's a break, if there ever is one. Sometimes there is, but it's important, and we will put them through that mindset training, because really it's about mindset, it's about philosophy. We'll go in, even if it's one, we know there could be a challenge, but you have to go. You just have to go. So we understand that. So that's what we're doing. And in terms of guns specifically, it's probably the appropriate time to talk about this. For the police department, we avoid anything. We try not to stay out of the realm of the world, politics and everything else. We're about saving lives. We're about doing things that we think will protect lives. And so, obviously, in Texas, you can carry it, and if law-abiding citizens, absolutely, go right ahead. But we're also about trying to keep firearms out of the hands of people that shouldn't have firearms. And there's a whole large number of folks like that. There are people who are, have already have criminal records and who have convictions that by law are not allowed to have firearms. And of course, there are youth that are not allowed to have firearms. And then of course there are other people that, that are engaged in different behaviors that we would not want, or mental illness or something like that, to a point that they should not have a firearm. So we're always advocating for that. And one of our biggest problems, I'll tell you right now, on the criminal side and the access to firearms, is how people that are law-abiding and carrying the firearm legally, but a lot of times there are different places in the city that you cannot take a firearm into that business or into that location. And so what do? A lot of times people say, well, I can't take it in, so I got to leave it in my car. And what they do is they just drop it under the seat, or they put it in a glove box, and they think by turning the lock on the glove box or on the console that they're securing it and all those things. And then they go into their business and they come back out and their car's been broken into and their gun is now stolen. In 2020, we had almost 2,800 guns reported that we know about, that are reported, were stolen from vehicles in our city. That's not the ones that we're not reporting. There's a lot of those too. In 2021, that number goes up to almost 3,700 guns. This year, we are well on track to go over 4,000 guns stolen from cars. Okay? By definition, that firearm's in the hands of a criminal, because it took a crime to steal it. And so a lot of our guns that are used in crimes, that are used to commit violence, that are used to commit robberies, and all those other things, are stolen firearms. So we are asking the public, we are pleading with the public to be responsible with your firearm. The city's about to go out. We're going to lead it in the Houston Police Department, but I know one of your colleagues, Councilmember Kamen, is submitted and given money towards this for campaigns and ways to secure those firearms. We want you to look at possibly additional safety measures. If you're going to leave in your vehicle, invest in a car safe. Things like that can make it to where a crook can not just break into your car and suddenly they're armed. So these are the things that we're going to be doing, and you're going to see a lot more campaigns from the Houston Police Department. Obviously, we want guns to be safe from being accessed at home too. For children, we give out the cable gun locks, which can keep a smaller child from being able to get a hold of that firearm and harm themselves or harm someone else. So we're all in on this. The goal is to keep guns out of the hands of people that should not have them, but we need your help. We need your support. We're going to need you to take a look at it closely if you are a gun carrier, a firearm carrier, just to make sure, because no one wants to be that person that had their firearm stolen out of their car because we didn't secure it properly, and now it's in the hands of a criminal who then uses it to harm somebody else. Because we'll eventually trace that firearm back, and it's just a tragedy. You don't want that. None of us want that. So that's what we're doing about that.
And I want to bring your attention to, and Chief, I want to turn it to you if you'll be so kind. But we have the mayor's copies of the mayor's One Safe Houston plan at the table on page 6. It talks about illegal firearms and also the buyback program. I believe that's going to be released in July.
Yes.
In July. So can you go ahead and touch on that, and then I want to pivot to the fire chief briefly.
So I'm gonna let Crystal handle that because she's running point. I'm helping. She's running point.
Yeah, so the gun buyback program is going to be happening this summer, and it's going to be completely anonymous, right? So we're not asking for any identification from anyone that's bringing those handguns in. We're not going to ask you for your ID. There'll be no license plate readers, none of that. You're going to show up. We're going to ask that you place your guns in the trunk of your vehicle or the bed of your truck when you arrive on the scene. You'll go to the first point of Station 1. It's going to be drive-through, kind of like COVID testing and things like that. And so HPD will be on site for the whole thing. And so you'll drive to the first station. At the first station, someone from HPD will go into the back of the vehicle outside in your trunk and get the gun. They'll clear it, make sure it's safe by taking the bullets and ammunition and everything like that out of it. And then they'll take it to Station 2. You'll drive to Station 2. At Station 2, a firearms expert will determine the value of your gun. We're doing long guns, and shotguns and rifles are going to be $100. Handguns are $150, and then $200 for automatic rifles. And so then at Station 2, they'll determine the value and give you a receipt. And then you'll drive to Station 3 where you'll get your gift card, and then you will drive out on your merry way. We wouldn't, again, ask you for any information, and there'll be more details coming out regarding the gun buyback in the next month.
Thank you.
We're really excited.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I know we've talked about that briefly at council, about the buyback program and those details, and we will be sharing that out. And there's a call to action for you. If you don't have the guns, you may know someone in your family or community. So help us spread the word. And it's anonymous. Chief Pena, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your contribution. Chief Satterwhite talked about the collaboration between police and fire, and sometimes we don't make the connection with when we're experiencing violent crimes of the demand of the fire department and your EMTs and the demand of your personnel to respond to that. So can you give us some context of how y'all are working hand in hand in the demand?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, I want to thank you for the invitation, Councilmember Thomas. It's good to be here with you. I see Councilmember Alcorn as well, and some other people in the audience. Thank you all for your engagement. As Chief Satterwhite mentioned it, and I want to make one thing clear: the working relationship between the Houston Fire Department and the Houston Police Department is a strong one. We've made it a conscious effort to partner up with our sister agency. We're the number 1 and number 2 draw on your general fund. And from my perspective, I believe that you all, the taxpayer and the community that we serve, expect for us to leverage each other's resources and work together for public safety. I'm not going to speak about the gun issue and give you my opinion. I think Chief Satterwhite summarized it really well. Other than the ask that we have some accountability. As gun owners, as responsible gun owners, we have responsibility, and we must be accountable for our actions, the safeguarding of those weapons, and also accountability from the criminal justice system. I see my friend Andy Kahn back there. He's been a bulldog as far as the impact of repeat offenders and the impact they're having on our community, and that is not without effect. The victims of violent crime, their lives are shattered, and a lot has been said about that. But one thing that we fail to connect is the impact that those traumatic and criminal acts have on your first responders, both police officers and our firefighters. This year, we've had over 300 gunshot wounds that we've responded to. 300. The murder rate is not that high, but the impact of that trauma is felt by your first responders each and every day. They carry that with them. It's cumulative. PTSD for our first responders is a real thing. And so, again, as a community, I think we have to do what we need to do to hold those in certain positions responsible and accountable for the public safety. That includes the fire department. And you know, one commitment that I've made is that we're going to do everything we can to advocate for the tools, the equipment, the things that are needed to properly serve and meet the expected risk in our community. And I think, you know, thanks to the council members and certainly Councilmember Thomas and Alcorn and every one of the council members, they've been very responsive to the needs of public safety. And I can speak for me specifically, they've been very responsive and receptive to the asks that we've made. We've made significant strides in equipment, in training, in investments in our personnel. We're short-staffed right now, but even that has been addressed in terms of the resources that have been allocated to ensure that we get our staffing back up to the appropriate level. Chief Satterwhite mentioned the collaboration and the training that we have with each other. Active shooter training is something that we have made a priority and something that we've committed a lot of resources and time and training to ensure that we're working together, that we establish a unified command, and that we're doing best practice as far as these types of incidents. Case in point, we had an active shooter in District C 3 months ago, Larry, or so. From the time the call came in to the time that we had resources hooked up with the police department and up on scene was 9 minutes. And that is extraordinary because we know that in these types of situations, we have to act quick. It's go, go, go. And our first responders understand the risk that comes with these types of incidents. But as far as equipment and training and partnership with the police department, we're all in on that. You know, it's sad to say, but it's a day and age. We see this more often. As I mentioned, over 300 shooting incidents that we responded to just this year. And so it's important for us to ensure that we are collaborating, that we're leveraging resources, and that we're doing the things that the community, I believe, expects from us. And the only way we know that is to be here in these types of forums, again, and getting the input from the community directly as far as what they expect from their fire department. So I hope I answered the question, Councilor.
You did, and it's a great pivot because I do want to let you know that you have white cards in your seat. That's for Q&A. So if you have some questions, we're going to open up. I have one question for Attorney Okafor, and we're going to open up for Q&A. So if you can use this time to write your question. And then our District F interns are in the house. Is that my daddy? Hi, Daddy. My daddy's here. Hey, Daddy. We come to these things, y'all. So, also District F interns, raise your hand so they can stand up. So we have Isabel, we have Tommy, Frederick's in the back. So they'll collect your white card. So go ahead and start writing that. So as you write your question, I want to pivot to Crystal. Can you talk about the dashboards? And Doug Smith is in the room. Doug had us talk about this at a super neighborhood meeting about the dashboards because he was unaware of just how robust they were. And it was a great opportunity for the community to know that they're public-facing dashboards for them to actually see the trends. So can you give us a highlight for once that was implemented till today? What's going on with those dashboards?
Absolutely. So the dashboards, they were released about a year ago, and they came out. The website is, let me make sure I don't mess it up. So on the dashboards, you can file a complaint, or you can give a compliment to the Houston Police Department. It's in 5 different languages. You have Arabic, Chinese, Vietnamese, Spanish, and English. There's also 5 dashboards on there. Of those 5 dashboards, there are the dashboard on traffic stops, there is a dashboard for cite and release, and then there's a dashboard on use of force, the makeup of the Houston Police Department, just the racial makeup and things like that. And then there is the disciplinary action dashboard. And so all 5 of those dashboards are interactive. They're updated on the 2nd of every month. The website for the dashboard is www.houstonpolicetransparency.org. And on that website, you can see all the information. One of the things we've noticed is that the cite and release, we were looking at it, and the cite and release looks very low. But when you took into account, I went into digging, and I was like, why is there only like 173 cite and releases, right? And I'm like, there's millions of people. Well, it come to find out that some of the bigger cases where you would get cite and release, like possession of marijuana and things like that, those aren't on there because they are gone through a separate system. So they're not a cite and release because the DA's office has the programs that are set up. So that's why the numbers look so low when you compare it to other cities. You can also look and see any disciplinary action for any officer. You're not going to see names because we're not going to give that information out, but you will see, it'll be changed. It'll have like a code on it, but you'll see any disciplinary action for that particular officer. You can see the racial makeup of the Houston Police Department. On traffic stops, you can see how many traffic stops, what the traffic stops were for, and all of that. You can see male, female, and all of this different information, and we're constantly updating it. And if you look at it, there's also a data dictionary on there that shows you different information about where, what some kind of terms might be, because we gather this information directly from the police department because we don't want to manipulate it in any way, shape, or form. So however they identify it is exactly how it's posted on that website. And then just so if you wanted updates on One Safe Houston, there's also a One Safe Houston website, and it's www.houstontx.gov /OneSafeHouston/. Oh, and also guys, the murder rate is down. We were above 30% in February when we launched, and we were down 2%. Thanks to Chief Satterwhite here and all of the officers of the Houston Police Department and HFD and everybody working tirelessly around the clock. It is awesome to see the trend going down. It is devastating that we are still losing lives, but the fact that we are down from where we started needs to be celebrated and to see the success of the program being implemented. So thank you to the mayor for his and the Councilwoman Thomas here and Councilmember Alcorn and all of the other council members for their initiatives.
Thank you for that. It's always good to close on a high note. So I have a couple of cards. There are more. We'll receive them as you submit them. But let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to try my very best to read your handwriting. I broke my glasses. So I'm going to try my best. Thank you very much. What is HPD doing to alleviate non-emergency calls and 911 calls being put on hold? Yes, I was put on hold when I called 911 this past fall. It is difficult to say something when we see something if we're continually put on hold.
So, and that's something we never want to happen.
Yes.
We'll start with that. Just a little bit of how calls are received and how, and the process where they eventually end up to a patrol officer that would be responding to your location. So when you call, initially make a call, 911, which is the most common way. It goes into our Greater Houston 911 system, and it's telecommunicators that are call takers. They don't work for the Houston Police Department. The design is set up, and it's set up at our Houston Emergency Center, and they take the call in, and then of course they have a whole list of questions they're going to ask, and they're taking these calls, and based on that, they're going to determine first, is it going to go to the police department, or is it going to go to the fire department, or is it going to go to both of us? And those all occur. And so those calls they come in, and there's a go through the list of questions, assessed, and then from there, depending on the answers, it's routed to the police dispatch or fire dispatch, who then has a direct line to the officers in the field, and then sends that call out, because the dispatchers are the ones that say, you know, it's called to a specific unit in a specific area that would be responsible, you know, tell them to respond to this location and give them some background on what that call is about, what that officer is going into. Same thing for fire, and Chief Pena may want to say something more on that on his end. But so that's how it goes. Being put on hold. You know, you should not be put on hold. But I mean, sometimes those call takers may have so many calls coming in, and if they're crisis calls that are coming in that they're trying first to manage, somebody's life is in jeopardy, imminent danger of a loss of life or something like that, they may be spending time on that, and unless the next call coming in is a light call, if it's not an emergency per se, it might get held. And so that is going to frustrate you, and I understand that 100%. We are working to overcome that. We are working to improve our response times. We are working to figure out ways to get an officer to your doorstep faster, to get a fire or ambulance to your address or your location faster. It's a process. I mean, the demands are very high, the numbers are very high, and I don't want to give you excuses. We will be there, but we are working on ways. Technology is going to help us out a lot in that regard. We are looking at new technologies that can expedite, you know, any loss of time from the call in to the dispatcher to the officer in the street. There's still a technology component there that if we invest in better technologies and we invest in some of the other things that are going out there that we have, you know, sometimes we'll take like gunshots. That's a common call we get a lot of time. There are gunshots in our neighborhood and things like that. Well, in a lot of neighborhoods, we're reliant on you to tell us when there's gunshots in your neighborhood. But we are slow because it's expensive, but we are moving in the direction of embarking on gunshot detection technologies that can get our officers notified much faster and get them there a lot sooner. So sometimes while you're making the call in certain areas of the city already, we might already be there. It's going to take some time. It's expensive, and it's going to take support from you all to get there. But these are technology is one way. How we do business is another way. Everything is geared towards how we better serve you. And so, again, we don't want you to be on hold. You call. That's our job. The history of law enforcement, the number one thing that police officers are supposed to do is when somebody calls, that we respond. I mean, that goes all the way back centuries. And so we have to meet that bar, and we're working to how we meet that bar the best for you.
Thank you much. Chief, I want to pivot to you. It says fireworks. Christmas, furious fireworks coming from walking trail along Woodchase Park. How do we report this if we see this happening on July 4th, especially with these dry conditions?
Well, certainly fireworks are always an issue, especially during holidays. Last New Year's Eve, we were in Baghdad. It was bad. It was bad. We used to have a tool available until the state law changed, where we could exclude the bringing in fireworks into the city limits. The state law changed. In the past, we used to post fire marshals, fire inspectors at the edge of our jurisdictions and monitor the sales of those fireworks, and we can pull over and confiscate those fireworks as they were coming into the city. The law changed. Now they can transport those. They don't allow you to use them, right? They're still outlawed. The use of those are still outlawed within the city limits. But once you have them available, they're going to use them. The tool that we had that was great was the fact that we could stop them from coming into the city, or try to stop as many of them from coming into the city. That's what was keeping the use of them down. Now, you know, we have to catch them in the act. And although we have inspectors driving around, and the police department helps in enforcement as well, unless we catch them in the act, there's really very limited things we can do. And so it is an issue, other than us putting out the information as far as the hazards of these fireworks, the impact that it has on our community. Every year we have fires as a result of improper use of fireworks. We have tens of injuries, some of them serious, as a result of the use of these fireworks. And so putting out the information, we're hoping that people do the right thing. But again, once they have them available and accessible, you know, we see what the effects are within our city. And look, it does have an impact beyond the damage to property and people using them. We have the largest contingency of military veterans here in the city of Houston. And you know, we talked a little bit about PTSD earlier, and that is something that we're concerned about as well. We do see the number of calls for mental health issues rise up during the holidays for various reasons. And I don't have the data to say that fireworks contribute to that, but they have to have some impact. So again, you know, it's something that maybe we can address at the state legislature to give us the tools in municipalities that want to outlaw the use of fireworks within the municipalities, to have at least that ability to prevent them from being transported. We've lost the fight as soon as we allow those. We can't really pull them over and confiscate those fireworks unless we see them in use, and it's very hard to do.
Yeah.
We can't be everywhere at once.
Thank you for that. Judge, this question is for you. Why do offenders get 3 days credit for time served? Why not 1 day?
That's actually a better question for the Harris County Sheriff's Office, because they calculate the time. We don't, and that's really the short answer of it. I would suspect that years ago, as the jails became overcrowded, they needed a way to express getting defendants out of the jail. So I would imagine that's where it's coming. It's certainly the credit, or good credit time, predates probably everyone in this room. So it's an old concept, but I would think that that is the reason. It has changed over the years. It would be 2 days, you know, 1 day credit for two. Here recently, or I would say at least within the last 4 or 5 years, it's been, you would say, 3 days credit for one day credit for three. So that's just how they calculate the time, and I believe probably crowding is the reason. To piggyback, if I can, about the PTSD, I can assure you that firecrackers are triggers for veterans with PTSD, and maybe that's the thing you all can start saying to your neighbors and those who want to go out and have a good time and celebrate the holiday. They may have some concern about their fellow veterans. Also pets. Those of us who are pet owners, my dog is distraught. And so every holiday that is involving, you know, that I have to take extra measures. And you can believe that when I'm in Veterans Court, we're going to hear about the new and additional things and the additional treatment that we have to figure out how to get to and discuss with our veterans as a result of what should be a celebratory moment.
Thank you. Chief, this question for both of you. How many fire academy classes this year? And then the same question for police.
So for the fire department, we were approved 5 training academy classes, cadet classes this year. We were approved 5 last year as well. As I mentioned, we're trying to make up a deficit that we lost as a result of what occurred in 2019 with Proposition B. When Proposition B passed, we had to cancel 4 academy classes. So we missed our recruitment target by 280 recruits. And by the time that was resolved or overturned in the courts, we couldn't just turn the spigot back on and bring those 280 back. We had to start the recruitment process. So it resulted in us not hiring for attrition for 18 months. That put us behind about 280 firefighters. Every year we have about 170 firefighters attrition in our department. So we're having to hire 100 above and beyond just to try to make up for those 280 that we lost. So it's going to take us several years to do that, but we were approved 5 academy classes, 70 per class. So 350 firefighters per year we're going to be recruiting and training through our academy class. So, and we're hiring. So if you know somebody under 36 that wants to serve their community, hfdcareers.org, we would love for them to be part of our team.
Thank you. And Chief, the same question, and I have a follow-up for you.
So not to be competitive tonight, but we are hiring also. And, you know, so, yeah, so likewise, we have 5 classes, and our goal is actually 75 per class that we would like to fill, or 375 additional officers every year. It's sometimes is a hard target to hit. You know, recruitment for us is always a challenge. It's a challenge across the nation to entice the very best, and particularly we want the very best from our own communities to do this job. I mean, it can be challenging to get people to come on board. I mean, with, you know, it's, what do we offer? You know, it's a real hard job, and you're going to deal with a lot, and you're probably going to work nights, and you're probably going to work weekends. And our young populations are like, wow, that sounds great. But I will tell you that it is a wonderful, most incredible career, and I've got 32 years in. I wouldn't have done anything else during those 32 years. It's been awesome, and the things that, the people that you get to help, you never forget. And of course, all the things you do. So, but yeah, 5 classes. Like the fire department, we face some challenges with attrition. A lot of our personnel, probably about at least 20%, are retirement eligible now. It has been worse. We have lost more. I think things are going to get a little bit better. We're becoming more of a younger department, and so that would signal that we would have our officers a little bit longer. But it is a challenge. I mean, we know, and we tell them every day, you're in one of the best cities, and the community loves you more than any other city loves their police. We know that, and I think that they see that. But you know, it's still, they see a lot. They have to deal with a lot. There's a lot of challenges, and it's keeping their morale up and keeping them motivated and keeping them out there doing the job at 2 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday morning. You know, when it can be a real challenge and the kind of things you may face. But yes, 5 classes. Sometimes we get 6. The mayor will add a 6th class. Those are all great, but again, our biggest challenge can be getting candidates, qualified candidates, in and signed up for the academy classes to fill the classes.
Thank you for that. Crystal, I want you to take this question. It takes nearly 3 weeks to a month for the HPD crime stats to be posted on the web. Why?
They're updated on the 2nd day of the month, and that's just where we gathered it from. We didn't want it to be updated every day. We wanted everyone to know where it's coming from. We get the statistics from them, and so when we came to a decision, we thought that the first once a month would be good. We looked at what other cities were doing, and they typically were updating it around monthly also, those that had dashboards.
Can't hear you.
I'm sorry, is this better?
You said they're posted when?
The 2nd of every month
No, ma'am.
on the police transparency
No, ma'am.
dashboard? Yes, sir.
I think he's talking about regular police stats.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't deal with the police department
The
stats.
operational summary is close to the middle of the month, and the big
Bob,
ones.
hold on, Bob. We're going to get there. Hold on 1 second.
Sorry, I was
That's my question.
I apologize. I was speaking in reference to the Police Transparency Hub. The statistics that are up there are updated on the 2nd of every month. The statistics on the Houston Police Department, I'm not there. I don't work for the Houston Police Department, so
Chief, can you speak to that? Or can we get a follow-up for it?
I certainly probably a follow-up, but as you know, that you're talking about crime statistics across the neighborhoods, right? So the reason, obviously, it takes a little bit longer. We just transitioned over. We're one of the first major departments. It's actually a great thing. We just transitioned over to a NIBR system, which is a little bit more in depth than our old FBI, crime stats that we would get. But all of those have to be vetted. You know, they go through a whole vetting process. We have a whole department and records division trying to make sure that those are accurate numbers and they're properly reported all the way up through the state and all the way up through federally. And there's some requirements around that legally. That's why it takes a little bit longer to get those stats out so that the public can see them. What you'll see sometimes right now is, and the mayor will also post it out, is we have the unofficial numbers like our homicide rate in the city, and like Crystal said, thankfully, It is down below last year at this time, and we're celebrating that because that's a great thing. Obviously, we know that it could very well go back, and we hope not, but we're going to do our best. But there are unofficial numbers that we will put out because I know the public wants that. The chief wants to get that out. But the official numbers that we published, they take some time with that before they come out.
Question, poker clubs in the area, is this related to increase in crime or gang activity?
So, are we talking about illegal gambling establishments or not? I mean, sometimes you can have your own. I mean, I'm going to assume we're talking about game rooms.
They're growing like mushrooms in our neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
They're obviously legal. The parking lots are
So,
full, and
well,
there's a
so
lot of crime.
they may, a lot of them, I won't broad brush, but a lot of them will meet standards and appear legal. Some of them will actually commit illegal behaviors inside because, you know, if we're talking about the game rooms, they're not supposed to yield a financial profit. It's supposed to be for fun. I know. This is a challenge. We have our Vice Division, part of One Safe Houston right now. We are working very hard. We have our differential response team officers, which deal with a lot of these different types of crimes that can grow into other things, because we know a lot of these places are targeted by criminals because they know there's going to be cash there, because we know what happens, and they end up being robberies and shootings. So yes, they do contribute to our violent crime and to our crime in general, and the chronic things that you face in your communities. They do. We are working at it. It is a huge challenge, but again, just you make us aware. We will work on it. We will look at every one of them. It's probably a great time to make sure that you all know that your commander for the West Side Division is Commander Reese Hardy, who is standing right over there, and thanks to him and his team. He's fantastic. His team is fantastic. So make sure if you haven't, you get to know him before we leave tonight. And then, of course, you bring those calls in and we'll deal with them. But yes, all that to say, it does contribute to the problem.
And one other thing that the mayor put forward and council passed was the camera ordinance. The camera ordinance is going into effect, I believe, July 18th. That ordinance makes it so they have to have outward-facing cameras that are going to be available to the Houston Police Department, and it's going to be at your game rooms, your convenience stores, your sexual-oriented businesses, and there's one more. And bars. And the bars. And so those 4 locations are going to have outward-facing cameras that are available. They have to store the video for 30 days, and then upon request, they have to make that video available to the Houston Police Department within 72 hours. And so that should help with the crime, because we all see that when they have surveillance video, the more we do technology, HPD and HFD are able to help facilitate the arrest and the finding of criminals so much faster, as we saw with the unfortunate situation that took place at the Galleria. The police department was able to use all those cameras to help identify them.
Thank you. I believe this is a question from Facebook, and just to let you know, we are live streaming this on the Facebook, so for those watching us, make sure you like, comment, and share. What investments will be made for de-escalation that doesn't involve policing with weapons in moments of crisis? I'll repeat it again. What investments will be made for de-escalation that doesn't involve policing with weapons in moments of crisis? Let's say if someone's having a mental crisis, a moment. Are there de-escalation trainings or practices that do not involve weapons?
And so I'd just like to say that the mayor and council have already invested almost $23 million of ARPA funding into mental health initiatives, so that the police department isn't going to those style scenes. So the MCOT teams and the CERT teams, the MCOT teams don't even have a police officer, and so they're going just out there with just a clinician, a mental health clinician. And then there's the training where those CERT team officers get the specialized training to go out to those scenes also. And so then they're going with a mental health professional. And then we've also got the telehealth aspect of it. And then HPD does training all the time, and Chief Satterwhite can discuss their training. But there is a financial part that we are, and council just extended the CERT teams, so they're working around the clock. So there's 20 CERT teams and 18 MCOT teams. And then I think they're purchasing, what's it, like 600 icons, I believe? Around Around 600 iPads are being purchased.
In addition to that, here's another question. How do you determine when it's appropriate to send only a mental health professional? What are forensic exams? And what happens to guns that are confiscated? Are they destroyed?
So I'll go in reverse.
Sure.
And so the firearms that are confiscated, depending on, it just depends on what the case is about. But so a lot of them are ultimately destroyed. That is true. But it depends if it was a stolen firearm, and depending on how that firearm was used, it may eventually end up back in the hands of the rightful owner if we can identify that person. So, so that's how that would work. And I believe, what were the prior two questions you had?
What are forensic exams?
Yes, okay, so forensic exams. And so there's, I'm gonna assume that we're talking about, if we're talking about our DART program, and that's our domestic abuse and response team. We actually now are going out with clinicians, that when we go to a domestic violence incident, we have clinicians that can also help with those individuals and do that forensic exam right there on our complainant, on our victim, and it helps build the case against, because domestic violence is a huge portion of our violent crime in our city, and it's a horrible scourge that we're trying to wipe out, but it's going to take time, and that requires a lot of, it requires police response, it requires a multitude of other responses from our clinicians, from all the persons working in our health industry to try to stamp this out. So that's what a forensic exam is they can go out there and do those right away, even on site, which is hugely helpful to building our case. And I think the first question was,
how do you determine when it's appropriate to send only a mental health professional?
so all right, so we have, again, when those calls come in, and I think Crystal mentioned our MCOT system, which are not law enforcement, that would be clinicians responding. And in those cases, it just depends on what information is given. If the person is in crisis but not violent, if there's no one else being harmed, and it's just that person, and they just want somebody to talk to, or it's deemed that it's not necessary to send a law enforcement officer for safety reasons, then those might be the occasions whenever we would just send out an MCOT team to those addresses. And it's huge, right? Because it takes a lot of the burden of law enforcement that can then focus on some of the other crimes that is either a crime, or maybe somebody is in crisis and also potentially threatening others. So the officers need to respond to those where there is a real threat, to ensure that we have officers that can, mitigate that and stop that person from hurting someone else or themselves.
I have a couple more questions. We're going to do final comments, and then I want an opportunity for y'all to engage with them directly, because I know there are probably some additional questions. So I want to wrap up with these remaining questions. What should I do when I see a car with black tinted windows, no license plate on either the front or back? Avoid it all.
All right, so okay, so we have when they have no plates, then that vehicle is on the road illegally, and for law enforcement, that would probably result in a traffic stop. For the public, and this question is coming from someone I presume from the public, if you can call it in, and of course that'll go in, and we can respond. There may be an officer close by that might be available to look into that. I'm assuming it's going to look very suspicious, with no plates. But then again, it could have been a person that just got their plates stolen. These are all possibilities. So understand that it is a violation of the law to drive on the roadway without a license plate in Texas. And officers, you can be pulled over for that. But that within that traffic stop, it's an information gathering, time. Do you know your license plates are gone? This is why I stopped you. And then the investigation goes from there. And there might be a legitimate reason. Again, they may have been just the victim themselves of losing their plate. Still going to get stopped, but we'll see what the investigation leads to.
On page 13, on the One Houston plan under Crime Stoppers, how many rewards have been increased for gun-related crimes through Crime Stoppers?
Crime Stoppers in the back?
I don't know if we have that intel in terms of the number of rewards.
I think what they're talking about, on page 13, I had read that earlier, that it says that the Houston One Safe Plan will partner with Crime Stoppers to increase basic rewards for gun-related crimes. I'm not sure who asked the question, but I think you're asking.
Okay, we'll probably have to get a follow-up, and we can do that. And all of the questions that were asked and that were not will be provided in the follow-up like we normally do, and that'll be sent out and shared publicly. So we'll make a note of this. I'm going to close our Q&A portion before we do closing comments with this question, and I think this might be an opportunity for a community partnership or training. Do you provide gun safety and general gun classes so individuals can properly protect themselves?
So I'll start with some of the training that we provide right now, which really is a lot of it is around potentially an active shooter or something like that. And within that are some tools and some training that's revolving around firearm safety. We have a person now that has taken it over and carried the mantle, and Stephen Daniel for our police department. He's not a law enforcement officer, but he is an employee of the Houston Police Department, and he's done a phenomenal job. And he's been teaching all over the city, and I think in other places in the state. But that training is geared towards the public and what to do in the event that you face a threatening situation, a person with a firearm, God forbid an active shooter or anything like that. But it translates to almost everything you're doing. How with part of our original video and training that we put out as a city. 10 years ago in Run, Hide, Fight that was adopted all over the world, and that's how to protect you. In terms of additional training, firearm-specific training to the public, we are not engaged in that at the moment that I can point to specifically to where you can sign up and come out to our range and go through a firearms class. We do have our Citizens Police Academy and other venues where you learn all about law enforcement, and then you also learn about these things too. But it's part of a larger package. We can look into that. I will say that, again, the challenge is our staffing. Our number one goal right now is to get out there and be available to protect you all. And we just have only so many. And for every team that we pull off to do specific things, I know it's bringing value, but we have to weigh everything because our number one job is when you call, we come.
So if the District F offered an opportunity for you to become trained or felt comfortable in an active shooter or to, learn how to use your gun, would y'all want to do that?
Yes.
So if we organized that, it brought people together so you can protect yourself and your family and learn how to use your gun okay, consider that done. We'll do that. So we will carry that burden, and we will organize that for the community, and we'll get started on doing that because a safer, the more information we have, the better protected we are. So I want to close out with some closing comments, and then I want to give our neighbors an opportunity to engage with you. So we've covered a lot. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of resources. We didn't get to every question, but I want to ask you, what do you think we need to know about public safety, and what do we need to do in the community in order to respond to that? For each person, whatever your space is, because I think every time we offer these types of town halls, we have to have a call to action. It's of no use for us to sit here and just absorb information, but what are you asking us to do? How can we support this work? How can we participate in addition to coming to town halls?
Okay, so I will start and say 1,000 things, but I'll be very brief. We rely on you. The police department cannot do this alone. We need your eyes and your ears, and we need you calling us and taking note and participating in how we and owning how we protect everybody. So more than anything else, I mean, you've heard it 1,000 times. If you see something, say something. But it's true. If something doesn't look right, and you see it, say something, but also avoid it. Distance is your friend. When you're out in the public, and especially, depending on what you're seeing, if something doesn't look right, and we all know that feeling, that tingling, when something's going wrong or not feeling safe, and this says something's not quite right, we always recommend distance. Avoid the situation. Remove yourself from the situation. Best way to protect you. Best way to protect your families. And also, when you're out and about, especially during low light times, in areas that don't feel right. Again, avoid those. Do things like get gas. In daytime hours. Don't go at night to a gas station to get gas. It's just that helps. Because again, people become victims more commonly in those later nighttime hours. So understand that's where the risk can go up. And so if you can avoid exposing yourself to that, do so. So I need your eyes. I need you to protect yourselves. And we need your support in all the things that we're trying to accomplish. And we'll get there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councilmember. I think that's really important what Chief Satterwhite was saying. It's important for what we're doing is that there's so many good changes coming to the police department, to our city. There's new initiatives and getting that out there. So I need your voice. We can make a lot of changes, but if we only have 10 people show up or know about it or talk about it, then it's not going to do as much as it could do. And so we're making the investment into the community. And so I need all of you to get into your groups and talk about the information you found out today. Bring them to the next meeting, talk to them about the gun buyback that's coming, or the safety for your guns and not leaving them in your vehicles, and all the other initiatives that are coming out. Visit the website, get informed, be a part of the political process. Make sure you go vote, because there's lots of laws that we need to change that we can actually pursue charges, especially like with catalytic converters. Chief Satterwhite and the HPD, their hands are tied when it comes to that. It's great that we're etching your names on them, so at least that I'm a former prosecutor, so as a former prosecutor, they can't prosecute a case if they see a van full of 50 Catalytic murders. They can't prove that those were stolen, and if they can't show that they were stolen or an owner, there's nothing we can do about it. The laws have to be changed that you can prosecute the cases. So use your voice, get out there, and tell other people about what's happening and the changes that are coming.
I would agree with much of what has already been said. Use your voice, meaning if there are any laws that you disagree with, you think should be changed or made better, by all means, please speak up to your legislature so that those things can happen. I assure you there is not a judge I know that takes the decisions they make lightly, and quite frankly sometimes lose sleep shaking, trying to make those decisions in that moment and using the information that they have at that time. So speak to your legislatures, try to get those things changed. If you feel that they are important, we are happy to follow the law no matter what it is. We will follow the law. Secondly, the 16 county criminal courts, we have what's called community care court. So we understand that if we provide more resources to people who may very well have convictions, or not convictions, let me just say deferred adjudication probations for persons who have low-level nonviolent offenses, if they have the opportunity to have that cleared, they have a better chance of getting a job. So we have now community care court that we put on every quarter where we offer those persons the ability to clean their records. We offer them other services, though, not our services directly, but connect them to those services where they can get job training and where they can get continued education. Because if they are active, law-abiding, working citizens, then you won't find them out in your streets doing other things to harm us and try to take from us, because they can provide for themselves. So that is one way that we're trying to give back to the community and make sure that we are trying to make our own community safer.
And just before, Chief, before you make your comments, I just want to remind you, District F, we have 3 state reps that represent our area. We have State Representative Jean Wu, State Representative Hubert Vo, and the newly elected, I believe he's the newly elected, he will be. There's a portion of West Chase, Manny Diallo. So get familiar with that level of government. There's a special call session I believe Governor Abbott's going to have, I believe. But when we go back into session in 2023, we need to make sure that those priorities, like the chief was talking about, simply about fireworks and their ability to respond and arrest, we need to make sure that we have those issues raised at that level. All of the stuff that y'all send to our inbox, we respond to that, but we have to sometimes filter that back to our state reps. So just as engaged as you are at the district level, local level for the city, it's just as important to be very familiar and in the face of those state representatives that represent you in Austin. Also, we have a Senate district, Senator Boris Miles, Senate District 13, and our Tommy Wong was just in Austin with him this morning, fighting on our behalf around environmental justice issues, particularly to District F. So he went to Austin and came back. So we have to make sure that we're responsible for that, because there's multiple levels of government, because everything doesn't happen at City Hall. Chief, please.
Councilmember, I think you summarized it up well. Look, what I recommend is that we be vigilant. We take care of ourselves and those around us. Be engaged, much like you are here, and use the power of your vote. Make sure that your state representatives, your local representatives, your local public servants are hearing what your concerns are. And because, again, a lot of times we make decisions based on what we think the community wants, but we don't know what they want unless we're out here and you all are vocal about what you expect from us. One of the questions that was brought up earlier was what to do in case a black car
With tint
tinted
and no
windows,
plates
no
on
plates.
the front or back.
Look, it's okay to not engage, okay? It's okay to not get involved in that stuff, other than maybe a report, okay? Again, you don't know who you're dealing with, and right now, people are on edge, and the best thing to do is just make sure you're taking care of yourselves. The calls to 911, and Chief Satterwhite mentioned it. Look, the HEC Center is where all the calls, the 911 calls come in. We know it's frustrating when you call and you're put on hold. I did check on this, unrelated to this meeting, months ago, as far as what the performance are, because there are standards for the 911 center. The standard says that they have to answer 90% of the calls within 15 seconds and 95% of the calls within 20 seconds. It doesn't sound, I mean, that's a lot of calls. But if you stop and think that we get over 1 million calls into that 911 center every year, 10% is a lot of calls that do not meet the standard. I'm just trying to put some perspective on that. The answer is, again, the 911, the Harris County, or Greater Harris County 911 district is the one that funds these PSAPs, these Public Safety Answering Centers. And we need to get more investment. We're a growing city. With the additional number of people coming into the city, we know that the 911 system is one of the things that gets, the demand goes up. And we need to be able to keep up with demand. There are various entities that exist to ensure that we're meeting that demand, and so we need to do a better job to ensure that we're holding them to let them know what their needs are, or what our needs are to serve the community.
Thank you. And it sounds like what I've learned tonight, that I have some homework to do on your behalf. It sounds like we need to have some type of gun training or active shooter training for the community, so we can all be prepared, and I'll commit to hosting and organizing that. Secondly, it sounds like as a community, a district residents, we need to get together and identify our legislative priorities locally and have a meeting with our state reps. And I think if we can collectively say what our priorities are around public safety, quality of life, understanding, the Chapter 125, all of those things, I think we can get some traction in the next legislative session. That's going to take us staying organized and following this process through the long time. So that sounds like that's my homework. Before I close out this portion, in an effort for you to meet the panelists and talk to one another, I have one request for a comment. Doug, is this you? Is this Doug? Oh, it was you. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. I wanted to make comments. Besides improving the light on the street, there is a huge problem don't know whether the police came or not, because the engine kept running until 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Wow. What kind of class that?
Lady after my heart.
I
call it in all the time.
Also, being parked on the street, they block the visibility.
Yep.
And there are emergency gates,
Yep.
there are a lot of exits, entrances, because there are a lot of apartments, a lot of condominiums, a lot of townhouses, and of course, a lot of people sleep there, all ages. And a lot of them are elderly with dogs
Yep.
for loneliness. And I witnessed a few times when somebody was about to be killed because the driver couldn't see, the person couldn't see the driver.
Yeah. You're absolutely right, and you are actually sitting next to the chair of Neighborhood Regulatory Affairs. And I raised this very issue to her a couple of months ago, and I said, we are bombarded with complaints just like yours, and I knew that her committee, she leads that committee that addresses that. So Councilmember Alcorn, can you talk a little bit about that?
I'm so glad I'm sitting next to you. Yes, July 12th, we are holding a meeting on this very subject. I had a pre-meeting yesterday. We're going to hear from police. We're going to hear from Park Houston. We're going to hear from Administration and Regulatory Affairs and Department of Neighborhoods. They're going to set the stage of what the current city processes are, what the ordinance are now, what processes are in place to enforce the ordinance. But what I need from you and other community members are to come to that meeting. You can go to virtually, online. We need for police and everybody to hear these comments.
Yep.
Because after this meeting, Councilmember Thomas, Councilmember Pollard, and we're going to put our heads together and figure out what needs to change, either in the ordinance or in policy or in resources that we need to give, so those ordinances that we have on the books that prohibit what you're saying can get enforced.
We asked the city, because I had to call the city several times, I asked the city to put signs, no parking for commercial vehicles, even though the driver should know, because in order for them to get a driver license, for truck driver license, or 18-wheeler driver license, they have to pass a test. And the test it says very clearly, they are not allowed to park more than 2 hours on the streets in the residential area, and they have to have the lights on, flashing lights on, for those 2 hours. Or they are not allowed to park in.
You have a heart of gold if you think they're gonna actually do that. Jeff Baker is a chair of Super Neighborhood 17 and routinely sends us photos, descriptions. We have, in one neighborhood alone, there have been 300 citations this year in one neighborhood. So you are absolutely correct. It's a huge public safety issue. There's a tow truck that is one of my neighbors drives a tow truck. He parks it outside the gate. My HOA always emails me because when I pull out, I can't see, and it can be a cause for an accident. So you're absolutely right. We are on it. We are going to address this. This is already in process, and everyone that has been sending emails to the district, we've been adding them to a stakeholder list. And once the call for the meeting goes out, we're asking each of you to participate on public comments, virtually or in person, because this is such a huge issue, and we have not revisited that ordinance in quite some
July
time.
12th, 10 a.m.
Yes.
There is another issue.
Well, I want to wrap this up, and we can continue to talk offline, but I want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to meet with our panelists. So I want to thank you all for coming. Pick up some resources. There's some snacks in the back. Don't be shy.